Very good morning, friends. So, I hope you're all doing safe and healthy. Well, in this particular month, I have been discussing about IFRIC 12, that is the Appendix D to Indes 115. And if you recall, I had given you a three-step model in terms of deciding whether IFRIC 12 becomes applicable or not. And the very first step is a very crucial step in terms of what we call a control test, where we said that under the control test, there has to be a regulation by the grantor on the operator in terms of three things: what kind of services are provided and to whom the services are provided, and also in terms of the pricing decisions as well. Now, there is a little practical issue which comes when you conduct the test under the step number 1, that is the control test over the tenure of the arrangement, and that is that this regulation may be something which is partially regulated and partially unregulated. Because there could be, two kind of situations. If you say that it's a complete level of regulation, then I think the step number 1 is not difficult to achieve. But when the practical difficulties comes, then what happens that there could be a situation where the arrangement may be partially controlled and partially it may not be controlled. Now, there is an application guidance which is given in the IFRIC 12, and there is a para number AG7 which talks about a situation when we are looking at the concept of a control test over the period of the arrangement. How do you look into the aspect when there is a partial regulation? Now, in this particular video, I am going to elaborate on the concept of para number AG7 along with an example to you. Let's find this out in detail. प्रयत्न सीए इंटरमीडिएट के बच्चों के लिए, जिसके अंदर आपकी 23 अक्टूबर से तकरीबन 80% सिलेबस आपके इंटरमीडिएट के सभी सब्जेक्ट्स का आपका इसके अंदर पेपर इवैल्यूएशन किया जाएगा। जो आइकॉनिक लर्नर्स हैं उनके लिए पेपर की कंप्लीट इवैल्यूएशन होगी और जो प्लस लर्नर्स हैं उनको एनालिसिस क्लास के अंदर मिलेगा। तो सर, ये इनके अंदर कौन कौन से सब्जेक्ट्स कवर किए जाएंगे? तो भाई, आपको मैं इसके अंदर बता दूं कि आपके सब्जेक्ट्स में इंटर अकाउंट्स में आप देख सकते हैं जैसे कि अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड्स, और आपके मेन टॉपिक्स जैसे हैं प्रॉफिट प्रायर टू इनकॉर्पोरेशन, बोनस इशू, प्रेफरेंस शेयर, डिवेंचर, इंश्योरेंस क्लेम। ऐसी सीएमए के अंदर मटेरियल, लेबर, साथ में ईबीसी, कॉस्ट शीट, और ये सब टॉपिक्स आपके सामने लिखे हैं, स्टैंडर्ड, प्रोसेस। तो इन सब्जेक्ट्स, ये जो आपके सिलेबस है, इनके अंदर आपके पास ये सारे के सारे टॉपिक्स हैं जिन पर आपका टेस्ट कंडक्ट किया जाएगा। ऐसे ही आपके इंटर लॉ के अंदर आपके जो चैप्टर्स हैं, प्रोस्पेक्टस, अकाउंट्स फॉर कंपनी, ऑडिटर्स, नेगोशिएबल इंस्ट्रूमेंट एक्ट, इंडियन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट, इनकम टैक्स के अंदर आपके पीजीबीपी, सैलरीज, कैपिटल गेन्स, इनकम फ्रॉम अदर सोर्सेज, डिडक्शंस के चैप्टर, ये सब आपके कवर होंगे इंक्लूडिंग जीएसटी। ऐसे एडवांस्ड अकाउंट्स के अंदर आपके अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड्स, पार्टनरशिप, अमलगमेशन, ईसॉप, बायबैक, अमलगमेशंस, ये सब टॉपिक्स आपके कवर होंगे। ऐसे ही आपके ऑडिट और इंश्योरेंस के अंदर, इसके अंदर आपकी ऑडिट स्ट्रेटजी, ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशंस, ऑडिट सैम्पलिंग, ये सब टॉपिक्स आपके हैं। तसल्ली से वीडियो को पॉज कीजिए और इस लिस्ट को आप लीजिए, और करना कुछ नहीं है। साथ में इस वीडियो के डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स के अंदर आपको एक लिंक मिलेगा और आप उस लिंक के अंदर उसे क्लिक करके आप इसके लिए रजिस्टर कीजिए। तो प्लस लर्नर्स विल गेट द एडवांटेज ऑफ इवैल्यूएशन इन द क्लास, एंड ऑल द iconic learners will get a evaluation of all this 80%। तो 23 अक्टूबर से ये शुरू होने जा रहा है, जिसके अंदर आपके इंटरमीडिएट के सभी सब्जेक्ट्स, जिसके अंदर आपकी इवैल्यूएशंस होंगी, लगभग 80% कवरेज ऑफ द कोर्स। तो आइए, लेट्स क्रैक इट। Well, you can see that what I've done, I've taken the extract of the para number AG7 because I think we'll be able to appreciate the practical nitty-gritties with this particular para itself. Now, just to remind you back that we were looking in terms of the control test over the infrastructure over the period of the arrangement. Now, para number AG7 tells you that sometimes the use of the infrastructure is partly regulated in a manner which is given in the para number 5A of the appendix D. And it could be partly unregulated. So remember, we are looking at the guidance when the control test in terms of the grantor controlling the arrangement is partially regulated, partially unregulated. Then what do we do? Now, the application guidance in this para has given us two different examples. One you can see in the clause number A, which says that any infrastructure is physically separable. That's one. It is capable of being operated independently. That's two. And number three, it meets the definition of a CGU as per IS 36 or Index 36. It shall be analyzed separately. So, if you say, let's say for example, if you look at the same example given in the clause A, let's say for example, you've got the job of creating an infrastructure, let's say a hospital. Now, in this particular case, let's say you have created a hospital where a portion of the hospital contains a private wing. So that's going to be unregulated. And then the remaining hospital is open to the public at large. So we can say that the entire hospital, the infrastructure is comprising of unregulated portion, the private wing, and it is comprising of, you can say, the regulated portion. Now, in this particular case, if you say that we want to apply IFRIC 12 to the portion which is regulated, then you need to prove the three factors. One is that it is physically separable. Second, you need to be able to prove that it is capable of being operated independently. And you should also be able to prove that it can be called as a separate CGU. In case an impairment testing is to be done, we could say that yes, it is a separate CGU. And that's a very difficult assessment. When you're looking in terms of a practical life scenario and you're looking at, these three parameters being met, and then I would say that let's apply IFRIC 12 to the regulated portion and let's apply, a relevant standard to the another portion. Now that can be a very, very challenging experience. I have a small little illustration also devoted to this. Then there is another example which is given in the application guidance that maybe, as a part of the infrastructure, you have not created a separate infrastructure, something which is not physically separable, but maybe we are providing some ancillary activities. Like for example, if you're thinking of a hospital, maybe you've created a hospital shop in that particular area. Now that is something which is an ancillary activities, and that might be totally unregulated. The grantor may not be regulating the hospital shop, which is the medicine shop in that particular area, though it is within the particular infrastructure. Now, in that particular case, the concept of a control test could have its own challenges in this particular case. So the standard says in these particular cases, what you need to consider is apply the control test, considering that if these services were not in existence, then would the control test get met or not? Let's take a little simple example in order to understand a further inputs in terms of the AG7 para. We're given an example: an operator constructed a sports facility under a contract with a grantor, and the grantor controls the prices charged to the children, pensioners and the unemployed, but the amounts charged to the other adults are not controlled. Now, the same swimming pool and other facilities are used by all regardless of what they pay. Now, in this particular case, you can definitely see that the regulation is something which is, not a full regulation, but it's a partial regulation. The grantor is controlling the prices charged to certain segments like the children, the pensioners and the unemployed, but he is not regulating at all what is charged to the other adults. Now, if you look at the para number AG7, can you say that this is a case where we can say that the infrastructure is, partly regulated, partly unregulated? No, it is a same infrastructure. So it doesn't fall in, the para number AG7, you can say the clause A. Because this is not a case where you can say it is separable, capable of being managed separately. It is the same swimming pool which is being used by different people, and certain set of people are not being regulated. And even you cannot say that this is something which is ancillary activity. So this is the kind of situations one could confront in a practical life situation. Now, what do you do in this particular case to decide whether it is under the scope of IFRIC 12? So generally in a practical life situations, what we do, we would, look at some quantitative information to decide the same. Look at the revenues which is coming from the controlled, that is the regulated portion. Look at the revenue which is coming from the unregulated portion, and accordingly, depending upon the revenues which is coming from the regulated and the unregulated portions, one would take a call. So this can be quite subjective indeed, but that's generally what we do, because the application of para number AG7 has got its own challenges. And this is for this reason that IFRIC 12 has got its own kind of challenges in a practical life situation. But I help this little input in terms of the guidance on this particular partial regulation helps. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next video. Thank you, take care, and goodbye.